When you putting these gigs on, there's so many of them where it just ends up pissing it down with rain. I think Duran was one. Was it Rod Stewart did not piss it down there as well?
Yeah, we specially range it.
And how do you? What's it like when you just don't know what the weather's going to be like? You're booking this show, months and months ahead, and there's all the logistics that go into it, and it could either be a great show and the sun's shining and the weather's nice and warm, or it just totally pisses it down. And
you make it as resilient as possible when you print your conditions on the back of the ticket carefully.
And do you get disappointed though? You're like, fuck, I wish I hadn't rained, or is it something where you're just like, well, it's raining, I'll just get wet, get into it?
Again, it varies. I remember, there's been some gigs, for some reason, particularly Run Rig seems to specialize in the Highlands of playing in places that get completely washed out, and it's very miserable, terrible.
And have you had any real sort of, we're talking about sort of extreme bands, but what kind of, what's the worst situation that you've actually been in, promoting something? Have there been ones where you've kind of narrowly averted disaster where you've just managed to pull it all together?
Yeah, I'm sure there are. But there's so many bad ones and so many good ones that whenever people ask me for the best or the worst, I sort of glaze over and I can't, 150, 200 shows a year for 30 years, and even today we're still doing quite a lot of shows. Yes, there have been many shows that have been saved by the skin of their teeth. One in particular I remember is Oasis at Loch Lomond, where it was 2 nights at Loch Lomond, and the police had insisted that we only had control within our perimeter fence. They wouldn't let us have control of the internal area of the park. So on the first night, and they insisted there was only one entry point. Great. 45,000 people coming in through one entry point. It's a wonderful idea. And then since we had no security, we weren't allowed to have security in the outer area, the locals came and took away the generators and took away the lights and whatever. And overnight, the police said, we're cancelling tomorrow. So 4 o'clock in the morning, I was waking up the chief executive of the local council and saying, I want you to get the police chief here. We are going to do this. We knocked down a wall. We created an extra entry point. We extended our control of the security to the gates. I and many other people did a 48-hour day that day. And the second show went ahead and there was no problems. That show nearly didn't happen. The day before the show, a guy was killed delivering beers to the site just because he didn't follow the rules. But that took me 4.5 years of court appearances before that was resolved. We've had other extreme situations. Edinburgh's Hogmanay has been cancelled a couple of times. We had a stage in Queen's Park down at Holyrood. It was actually lifted up and blown away. Porta cabins lifted up and blown away. 178 mile an hour winds that were recorded.
Jesus.
So yes, if you go outdoors, you take chances.
So, by the signs that you started out as an idealist, but it sounds more like you're a masochist when you describe these kind of things. Is there a sort of part of you where you're just like, this might really hurt, but, the payoff will be worth it if it works out?
I don't think masochist or sadist is the right word, but I think you have to be resilient. You have to be brave enough to. My view is I look at it pessimistically all the time, which most people find very boring. But if I look at the worst that can happen and see if that's survivable, then we can go ahead. So that rather than looking at things optimistically, I've got the half-empty look, whereas my other half, Pete, can not worry about these little things. Just get on press all the time.
That's another thing. How long have you been working together since 1978?
Well, you could say it goes back further than that because while I was editing Student, Pete was putting on a couple of gigs in Edinburgh at the same time. We had Captain Beefheart and Dr. John and people like that. And I would do the press, and he would put on the gig down in Leith. I remember Captain Beefheart, the journalist, the student went out and said, "What's the meaning of reality, Captain Beefheart?" And the captain said, "The blue whale." So that was the headline there. So, what's the meaning of reality? But it turned out to be quite right. The blue whale was quite an appropriate thing to say in 1970 as the future of the universe.
And, in terms of the sort of rock and roll side of things, I mean, from yours and Pete's perspective, I mean, I'd find it hard to, you're saying you're up for 48 hours to make sure that the Oasis show goes ahead. I mean, in the earlier days where, if you were putting on gigs, were you also sort of partying at the same time, or was it always very much you had to be the sober one? You couldn't get involved in all the festivities like everyone else.
What was that about, past tense? I don't think things have changed particularly. Probably still got most of my bad habits. But though not hopefully not repeating what happened to me the last time I was on this stage. But anyway.
So I was telling them about what I did on the last time I was on this stage. Well, not before today, but it's another matter. Has anyone got any questions? Because I'm conscious of the fact that, times we're actually slightly over our time for TV. This is right at the back. I can see Thomas. Pass him a mic.
Hi, Barry. Tam Coyle, Glasgow promoter, DJ, manager, etc., etc. Barry, you talked about the glory days in the mid-80s. The Barrowland had a elastic wall, shall we say, of the big five that you promoted all the way through there, the Bunnymen, U2, Simple Minds, Runrig and the Pogues. Who does hold the official attendance record for the Barrowland? And is it a figure of 4,100 for the Bunnymen?
You heard 4,100. No, I can't admit to that much.
Okay, 4,098.
No, I think it's true to say that Simple Minds had 3 nights there with about 3,500. Anyone that's gone beyond that must be seriously mad. Because I've been downstairs seeing the cracks appear when you've got that many people in there, and we just don't do that sort of thing anymore.
What are you thinking when you see these fucking cracks appear and it's your gig?
Well, just to show your confidence, you stand underneath it to make everybody else feel it's going to be all right.
You're not shiting yourself when you're standing there.
It's a bit late by that point.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it in the picture I saw, back in the days when you were promoting in there in the 80s, like seeing the floor, and I'm like, right, I'm straight down the front. The mosh pit at Killing Joke is marginally safer than standing underneath that balcony. So I guess like no one died, so it was all right. Has anyone else got a question? Bruce.
Oh.
Is this something you've been wanting to ask him all your life?
No, Barry and I are very good friends, Olaf. I don't need to wait for something like this to ask him these kind of things. These are intimate. But on the other hand, Barry's been talking very seriously, and it sounds awful serious. And Barry's often had to do with the logistics and dealing with the police and this, that, and the other. But I know, because Barry and I are pals, we've had a few laughs and a bit of fun as well. And one of the things I do know is in the Tiffany's days, which are possibly, in my opinion, the most legendary days of regular music in Barry Wright, when all these bands, Iggy Pop and Blondie and Ramones and such like, played there, and for the first time in Scotland for that matter. And Barry had a flat, which was a tiny wee flat, and a wife, and he had 2 kids. And I believe, Barry, that you often offered accommodation to the bands. But did they stay in your flat? Is it true the Ramones slept on your floor and people like that?
Yeah, it wasn't so much that we offered accommodation. It was sometimes bands would turn up and they hadn't arranged any. I can remember the most extreme case was a set of old hippies called Gong, who turned up in a multi-painted bus, and they had their whole families with them. There was 30 of them. So half of them stayed in the bus and the rest of them stayed on our floor, and it was just ridiculous. But yeah, the Ramones have stayed there. There have been quite a few parties. For some reason, we had a series of birthdays. Patti Smith had her birthday in the Antiquary and was refused entry by the bouncer on the door. The Ramones had a birthday party in the Pete's flat upstairs from the Antiquary. The B-52s had a birthday party there as well.
Yes, there seems to be a recurring theme, the Picture House, well, the then Cali Pali as it was, the Noise, the Empire. I mean, how many venues did you kind of launch only for them to be closed down by noise regulations?
I don't think
462.
Well, it happened everywhere. They invented an audibility rule, which actually applies today. So every pub in Edinburgh breaks the law, because if you can stand outside the pub and hear anything in it, you're breaking their law. But it meant that they had something that you couldn't comply with, and so it was easy for them to close things down. And we just beat them into the ground by getting more allies on the other departments, to the point where noise control don't come to our EPOG meetings anymore. To EPOG meaning the planning meetings. They don't attend. They're invited, but they've given up.
Right. We'll edit that bit out of the film, yeah. Don't want to tempt fate. Anyone else got a question? Well then, I think, Jim, just quickly squeeze one in there.
I owe you a debt, because my first ever gigs were at the Cali Pali in 1980-something or other. Tam mentioned sort of the golden era of the 80s or whatever. Well, what do you consider to be the golden era for live music? And is it possibly now? There seems to be more happening than I can remember.
I think it's up for each generation to know that for themselves. I think your own golden era is probably when you're in your own prime and so on. But I like to think that I'm now an old age pensioner, except I haven't stopped or don't take the pension. But I like to think I'm still up for the music and still excited by the music. The 80s were a special time in Scotland because there were so many good bands coming out of Scotland at the time. I think there's a new generation of bands again in Scotland, but I don't think it got as easy a route as they had in the early 80s. I don't really think I can. I mean, to be in the pit when Eminem are on Glasgow Green and the police are going crazy, it's great. It's exciting, to be with Oasis or BDI and completely shock the entire establishment is still great fun for me. So I think I'm still on the rebel side rather than the establishment side, and I think that's where rock and roll should be.
Great. Well, Barry, I think that's a great note to end on. I'd like to say before we sort of finish here, there's obviously the next phase, which is going to listen to music rather than talking about music. We've got 6 amazing acts on. If you don't like them, they're only on for 20 minutes. And then there's... But I think you will like them because they've been lovingly selected by myself and the rest of the Born to Be Wide team with lots of great suggestions. And the first, with your wristband, you can get into all of the gigs, starting off at Sneaky Pete's 7:30, so you got time to go and grab a bite to eat or actually see some daylight. We've got Letters and Pause in Sneaky Pete's. We've got Rachel Samani and Withered Hand in Cabaret Voltaire. We've got Go-Go Bot and Capitals in Electric Circus, and then we're going to have a huge party. And I think we're going to get the wheel of fortune out to decide what kind of music is going to get played for the next half hour.